Imagine a world where the SCP-Foundation, the organization sworn to protect humanity from the dark, suddenly decides that the kindest thing they can do for us is to make us extinct.
Item number SCP-5000. Object Class Tomiel. Special Containment Procedures. SCP-5000 is to be kept in a high-security storage locker at Site-22. Access is restricted to personnel with Level 4 clearance or higher.
All data recovered from the internal storage of SCP-5000 is to be kept on a localized air-gapped server. No attempts are to be made to replicate the technology found within SCP-5000, as its origin and operational mechanics remain largely theoretical and potentially hazardous to the current timeline's stability.
Description: SCP-5000 is a mechanical suit designated by its internal systems as an Absolute Exclusion Harness, designed by the Foundation in a parallel or alternate timeline. The suit provides its wearer with total life support, waste recycling, and most notably, an advanced perception filtering system.
This system renders the wearer effectively invisible, silent, and undetectable to both human senses and electronic surveillance. The suit appeared instantaneously within the containment chamber of SCP-579 on April 12th.
Inside the suit was the corpse of a human male, later identified via DNA analysis as Pietro Wilson, a Foundation technician who in our timeline is currently alive and employed at Exclusionary Site 06.
Along with the body, the suit's internal database contained a series of logs and a single briefcase containing SCP-055. The following is a chronological reconstruction of the events detailed in the suit's logs.
The narrative begins on what Pietro Wilson calls Day Zero. At 10 a.m., the Foundation simultaneously released a broadcast to every government, news agency, and Foundation site on the planet. The message was simple. For those of you who are currently human, we have a message. We are coming for you. You are going to die.
Immediately following this declaration, the Foundation, utilizing its vast resources and contained anomalies, began a systematic campaign of global extermination.
Pietro Wilson was stationed at Site-19 when the purge began. He describes the scene not as a chaotic massacre, but as a chillingly efficient operation. Foundation security teams began executing non-essential staff with clinical precision.
Wilson only survived because he stumbled into the Absolute Exclusion Harness in the experimental tech lab and activated it before the soldiers reached his sector. The suit's cloaking worked. He watched as his colleagues were lined up and shot.
He watched as the Foundation released SCP-096 in the middle of a crowded city center by broadcasting its face on every television screen and billboard in the region.
He watched as SCP-682 was released, not as an escapee, but as a deployed asset. For the first time in recorded history, the hard-to-destroy reptile was working in cooperation with Foundation personnel.
Pietro's logs capture the utter psychological collapse of the world. He traveled across a dying United States, witnessing horrors that the Foundation had once spent billions of dollars to prevent.
In one entry, he describes a Foundation cleansing squad. He notes that the soldiers didn't look right. They didn't move like people. They moved like machines, their faces devoid of any emotion, even as they committed atrocities that should have shattered a human mind. Pietro eventually found a discarded Foundation internal memo titled Project Numa. It detailed an attempt by the Foundation's Ethics Committee and the O5 Council to map the human collective unconscious. They were looking for something they called the entity.
According to the logs, they found it. And once they found it, they realized that every human being on the planet was infected by it.
The memo stated that this entity was the source of all human empathy, pain, and emotion. But the Foundation didn't see these as gifts. They saw them as a parasitic infestation. The decision was made. The only way to kill the entity was to kill its host. Total omnicide was the only cure.
Those Foundation members who were cured were those who had their connection to the entity severed. These individuals became the cold, detached killers Pietro encountered. They no longer felt pain. They no longer felt fear.
Pietro's journey becomes a descent into a global graveyard. He records the fall of Ganzir, a massive refugee city that held out against the Foundation for months.
The Foundation didn't use bombs to take Ganzir. They used a mimetic agent that caused the inhabitants to stop perceiving the color green. Within a week, the city's internal infrastructure collapsed, and the Foundation moved in to finish the job.
In his logs, Pietro grows increasingly desperate. He is the last human he knows of. He describes a sensation of being watched, not by the Foundation, but by the entity itself. He eventually receives a signal from a group of survivors claiming to be Foundation defectors. When he meets them, he realizes they aren't defectors. They are cured Foundation agents who are trying to understand why he hasn't died yet. Pietro escapes, but not before he witnesses a Foundation researcher testing a cure on a captured civilian. The researcher is cutting the civilian's arm off, slowly. The civilian isn't screaming. He's just watching. The researcher asks, "Does it hurt?" The civilian replies, "No, it feels quiet." The researcher smiles, a cold, terrifyingly empty expression, and says, "Good, then you're almost free." Pietro realizes then that the Foundation isn't being cruel for the sake of cruelty. In their twisted post-human logic, they are being merciful. They believe that a universe without human emotion is a universe without suffering.
Pietro decides he cannot let this timeline stand. He recovers SCP-055, an anti-mimetic anomaly that no one can remember the description of, and heads toward SCP-579.
The final logs are frantic. Pietro is dying. The suit's life support is failing. He is trekking across a wasteland of ash and bone. He describes seeing the Stretchers, entities the Foundation created by stretching human bodies until they were miles long.
His last entry is recorded at the site of SCP-579. He is surrounded by Foundation agents. They know he's there. They can feel the presence of someone who still feels.
Pietro writes, "I hate this. I hate that I can feel the wind. I hate that I can feel the cold. I hate that I'm afraid. But I'd rather be afraid than be like them. If the entity is what makes us human, then the entity is worth the pain."
He describes looking into the briefcase at SCP-055. He doesn't remember what it is, but he knows it fits with 579. He knows they are two halves of a key that can unlock the universe and start it over. The log ends with a final shaky sentence. Why?
because it's better this way. Pietro Wilson threw himself and the briefcase into the heart of SCP-579.
The resulting explosion of temporal energy didn't just destroy the site, it unmade the timeline. The world was reset. The Foundation's discovery of the entity was erased. The cure was never found. The war on humanity never happened.
But the suit remained. When SCP-5000 appeared in our timeline inside the containment chamber of SCP-579, it brought with it the memory of a world that almost was.
Foundation analysts have spent months de-encrypting the logs found in the suit. The OFI Council has reviewed the findings in total secrecy. The most disturbing part is the final addendum by the current Ethics Committee.
The addendum reads, after a thorough review of the logs recovered from SCP-5000, Project P-Numa has been authorized for our timeline. We need to find out what they saw. We need to find out what is in us. We need to know why.
The Foundation is currently mapping the collective unconscious. They are looking for the entity, and if they find it, they may reach the same conclusion their counterparts did. They may decide that we are better off dead.
Subscribe for more files from the Foundation archives.